just wanted to thank everybody for being here today. We're doing this interview with the expert series, especially during this time, during the COVID crisis, really for two reasons. One, to get some real information out there from the experts that can help the people that are watching this video here. Last week, we did an interview with a financial advisor, Jason Weiss. And the reason that I reached out to him to jump onto here to this interview was because there was so much misleading news out there about what the Fed rate cuts actually did, why the stock market was as volatile as it was. And at the end of the day, people just want the truth, right? People want the truth without spin, explained to them in a common sense sort of way. And that's what we did last week. And this week, the other reason that we do this interview with the Experts series is because there's a lot of people out there that need a lot of help. And I think that the case that can be said during any time, but especially through the crisis that we're seeing now. And there aren't many things that are more important right now than feeding people that need the help, feeding people that need the food. And so I reached out this week to Greater Boston Food Bank. I didn't know what kind of response I'd get. I mean, I didn't know if they were running on a skeleton crew and weren't even checking their emails or the direct Facebook messages, that sort of thing. And within, I'd say within an hour, certainly, Asia Ewing, the corporate relations manager from the Greater Boston Food Bank, reached out to me. And she introduced me to Arlene Fortunato, who's a senior VP for advancement for the Greater Boston Food Bank. So Asia and Arlene, say hello to everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Greetings.
And thank you very much for joining us here today. I just wanted to talk with you guys today about the Greater Boston Food Bank's mission. I guess I'll be completely honest. I thought that the Greater Boston Food Bank was really a large food pantry for Boston. Mm-hmm. And I found out within a few minutes of the initial conversation that I had with Asia earlier in the week that your mission goes far beyond that. So if you could you guys just share with us a little bit about what the Greater Boston Food Bank is and what you guys, what you guys do on a day in, day out basis?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. Again, my name is Asia Ewing, Corporate Relations Manager at the Food Bank. We're so excited to be here. Thank you for having us, Bob. This is awesome.
Thank you.
But yeah, to your point, a lot of people do think that you can walk up to the food bank and get food, which isn't necessarily the case. We at the food bank serve over 190 cities and towns in Eastern Massachusetts. And our mission is simple. It is to end hunger in Eastern Massachusetts. And we do that with a huge network agency. We have over 500 network partners. These are kind of what you're thinking of: food pantries, churches, health centers, different partners and agencies that we work with that actually are getting the food to the community. You can think of the Greater Boston Food Bank as the distribution center. So what we do is purchase and receive donated food, healthy food specifically, and we help to get that product out into the pantries in the communities for clients to be able to receive. So last year, we distributed over 68 million pounds of food last fiscal year, which is a little hard to think about what that looks like. Another way to say it is over 56 million meals to the Eastern Massachusetts community, which is huge. So and of that food that we distributed, over 65% was fresh produce, protein, and dairy. So a lot of people think of food banks and they think of canned foods, and there's certainly some aspect of that. But at the Greater Boston Food Bank, we really, really put a huge emphasis on distributing fresh food to the community on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of our overall. A few other facts: we see about 22,000 volunteers a year, and our volunteers are essential to the work that we do in the community. But we also have over 70 direct service programs, so mobile markets and food pantries and things like that. So definitely a lot of different moving parts, but to your point, you cannot walk into the food bank, unfortunately, and receive food, but we do have a lot of resources out there and partner agencies that help us with that. So
wonderful. And Arlene,
that was great. I just want to
Yes.
say that I'm Asia's boss, and I've never heard her pitch the food bank, and I will say that you did an excellent job. That will be great. We come, our review time and bonus time. Good job of describing what we do.
And Arlene, tell us a little bit about what is it that you do with Greater Boston Food Bank?
So I'm the Senior Vice President for Advancement. I oversee all of the fundraising, all of the marketing and communications, public relations, public affairs, government affairs, and the volunteer program. So we do, in addition to the work that Asia described, we have a revenue team of about 30 people who raised last year close to $20 million in, roughly speaking, philanthropic support. We have an operating budget of about $43 million. And in addition to the money that is raised by our team, we manage a Massachusetts state line item called MEFAP, the Massachusetts Emergency Food Appropriation Program. And that's a $20 million line item that is split proportionally between the 4 food banks in Massachusetts. So Greater Boston Food Bank is a part of Feeding America, which is a national system of food banks. And Feeding America assigns essentially a geographic footprint to each food bank. Ours is Eastern Massachusetts. So our service goes from Cape Ann to Cape Cod, as far west as Worcester. And then there's a Worcester County Food Bank, and then there's a Western Mass Food Bank and a Merrimack Valley Food Bank. We are the largest provider of emergency food in New England. And in terms of Feeding America's 180 or so food banks, we are in the top tier of those in terms of size and scope and scale. We rely, as Asia said, tremendously on volunteers. And as you can imagine, when this crisis hit, about 90% of our volunteer workforce are corporate teams. And immediately, we can trace it back to the day, March 12th, every corporate group canceled. So there we usually have 500 volunteers a week. We went down to about 100 volunteers a week and had to supplement that with our team. During the crisis, we have been designated an essential service. Mm-hmm. So although we do only have our essential employees on site, we are able to continue to operate fully and without any restrictions because we're on the front line, essentially providing this basic human need of food. In the 5 weeks or so since the crisis peaked, hasn't peaked, since the crisis became real for many of us, we have distributed over 8 million pounds of food. And as Asia said, still trying to keep our percentages high of fresh and nutritious. But what we've seen is because of social distancing and other restrictions related to social behaviors, our agency partners are requesting more shelf-stable product because they're preparing boxes that they can do a grab and go with their clients. So rather than having people come into the pantries, they're able to drive by, get a box, and keep moving. So we've seen what we have worked so hard over the past 10 years to flip the percentages of what we distribute from shelf stable to fresh, and now we're sort of challenged to go back to the old model. That's not to say that the food we're distributing can't still be nutritious. It is. But it's been, I was saying this to Bob and Asia before the call started, it's a new world every day. We have no idea what's coming at us. We are finding it impossible to plan. And we are responsive. We need to be responsive to the needs of our agencies. For example, of the 530 agency partners that we serve, as of today, approximately 50 of those have shut down. And what we've seen is that some of the agencies close and they reopen. It all depends primarily on volunteers. So in addition to our need for volunteers, our agency partners are desperately in need of volunteers. So I'm sure everyone on this call has a food pantry or a food distribution program in your community. If you're healthy and you can, you feel comfortable, you should think about volunteering, because they need that as much as we do. We're lucky because we have a workforce we can redeploy, but a lot of these agencies are 1 and 2 people, completely volunteer run, and they need that kind of help in a big way.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And just to make sure that I understood correctly, so the demand for on the Greater Boston Food Bank over the last 2 to 3 weeks has increased anywhere from 200 to 300%. So either doubled or tripled, while your volunteer workforce has decreased by 80%.
Right.
So
That's
2 or 300%
exactly right.
increase in output with 20% of the bodies that you normally have.
Exactly. And that's why our frontline team, I mean, we have this amazing group of people in our warehouse and our truck driver fleet that are working 6 days a week, 16 hours a day. I mean, they are, and it's, believe me, they're not making a fortune here, as you can imagine.
Right.
They are so dedicated to this mission. It's inspiring. Every day when I walk in here, I feel flooded with gratitude and pride that these people are willing to do. They're essentially, like first responders, putting their own safety at risk to be able to continue to do what we are committed to doing, which is getting food to people who need it. And a big reason for the increase is the newly unemployed. So we hear these figures in the about the rise of the crazy rates of unemployment, and a lot of the people, our pantry partners are reporting that a lot of their sort of new business are people who have never been in need of a food pantry before. So it's the working poor, it's college students who no longer have meal programs to rely on, and that's what's driving, in many ways, the volume.
Right. And we just, Arlene, you just touched on it, but I'll bring it up here. You just talked about those unemployment reports. And for some people who maybe don't pay, too much attention to some of the government economic reports that came out or that come out regularly, 2 weeks ago, a government report came out saying that I think it was 3.3 million Americans filed for first-time unemployment benefits, really 3 weeks ago, and was reported 2 weeks ago. And then just, I think, yesterday, last week's number came out, and it was over 6 million. So at this point, we can easily say over 10 million people nationwide over the last 3 weeks get laid off or furloughed, and they filed for first-time unemployment benefits. 10 million people. The 3 million number, that broke a record. Of course, the 6 million number broke a record. To put things into perspective, the previous records, which happened just after, I think, the crash in '87, and then during the global economic emergency that we had just after 2008 and 2009, were just over 600,000 people.
Wow.
So 600,000 people. That was prior to the last couple of weeks. That was the recent record in people filing for first-time unemployment benefits in a week. It went from 600 and change thousand to 3.3 million, and then over 6 million just this week. So we're seeing a huge influx of need here. And Asia, we had talked earlier in the week, and you gave me some quick stats that were just astonishing. So, could you tell me on a typical day how much food without the COVID emergency, how much food might the Greater Boston Food Bank send out in a given day in a typical environment?
Sure. So typical environment, we might distribute between 150 and 200,000 pounds of food a day. Currently, it's looking more like 350 to 400,000 pounds of food a day. Another staggering number is, throughout the month of March, we distributed over 8 million pounds of food last month, which is a record for the food bank as well. We've never even distributed 7 million pounds of food. I think our last record, and Arlene can correct me if I'm wrong, was a little over 6 million pounds in a month.
That's right.
So we are seeing, last month, we distributed 2 million more pounds of food than we would in a normal month. And to do that on a skeleton crew, like Arlene said, it's kind of amazing. It's a little bit of a miracle to me, just the fact that our our workers are still out there doing all this great work, but the need is definitely there. I mean, like I said, the unemployment rates and all that, people who have never had to go to a pantry before are finding themselves in a position where this is a very serious option for them. And so, yeah, we just want to ensure that we can continue to maintain that as the need. I think we're all sort of in a place where we're not sure. We know this is going to change the trajectory of our lives for a while, probably forever, this crisis. And what does that look like for us in 6 months when perhaps we're not in quarantine anymore, but not people haven't totally recovered from the effects of this. So I think that is our biggest thing right now, is what does this look like for the people who need it and our clients over the next 6 months, over the next year, and what they need from us over that time as well.
I would just like to add one other thing to what Asia's saying. We, as a food distribution service, have a huge impact on helping to end hunger, but there are other tactics and other programs that support our work, primarily SNAP, which is essentially food stamps. And we have seen an increase in SNAP applications as well as an increase in the demand for food. We've tripled what we normally see in terms of applicants. Most of the people that we are registering are older elders, and SNAP is an essential part of keeping people fed and healthy. And there is still, at this moment, an assault out of Washington to reduce the SNAP eligibility requirements and to make them much more stringent, to include an employment requirement, even while this crisis rages. So we have another part of the team that I oversee is our government relations team, and we work a lot primarily at the state level, but we also have been engaged in a coalition of other food banks and other food safety organizations and legal services, et cetera, trying to move the needle around the SNAP issue as well, because we can distribute food all day long, but if we can get people onto food stamps so that they can walk into any grocery store, any food purveyor and buy food, that is just that's the real game changer.
Right. And that would really decrease the burden obviously on you guys a lot too. I mean, that's really at the end of the day what it's about, and it allows for more flexibility, where if someone can drive to their local supermarket or get to their local supermarket, get to the local corner store, use food stamps that way, as opposed to, I mean, they may be miles from their closest food pantry. I think that certainly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's this is why we're doing it. I think I never would have thought of something like that. A lot of other people, never would have thought of something like that too. So thank you very much for that. That's really important. So let's talk now about volunteers. So I found with food pantries, especially, maybe not so much with the food bank, there's oftentimes conflicting information as to whether or not, or as to what types of help the food bank is receiving. There are times where I just hear through the grapevine that the food bank is accepting, non-perishable items, but they're not accepting cash donations, that sort of thing. I've always thought that was kind of funny. But tell me at this point, what types of help could people offer to the Greater Boston Food Bank right now to help you guys, during this time especially, and even after?
Our two biggest pain points are money and volunteers. And the money is essential because Asia referred to this, that we purchase 50% or more of the food that we distribute so that we can control the quality of it. We do get a lot of food donated from major retailers, but what's happening in the retail world is that the 50% of the population who would typically go out to restaurants and eat most of their meals out of their homes are now having to grocery shop. So what we had seen as donated product, sometimes we call it salvage, and also enabling, where we can hook our clients, our agency partners up with grocery stores that have surplus food, that surplus food is now being sold at the grocery store. And so our pipeline of donated food has dried up. In addition to that, because of issues related to freight and transportation costs, and also quarantines and other barriers, the price of a lot of food is increasing. For example, 3 weeks ago, we could buy a dozen eggs for 70 cents a dozen. Now we can buy a dozen eggs for $2.75 a dozen, which is the wholesale price. And that's an enormous increase. But we are committed to making sure that we're supplying that food to the folks who need it. So that's why we need to keep raising money. We need to keep raising money and spending it on food. If you make a donation to the Greater Boston Food Bank, 90+% of that goes directly back into the community through food and our programs. We are not feathering our nest here. We are working on a skeleton crew, and our costs are 90% food. We have had to invest more in overtime and some bonus pay for our frontline workers. We've increased the cleaning costs for our facility to make sure it's safe. But those are the essential areas of increase driven by the price of food. So we need food and we need people. So we still need small groups of healthy volunteers coming to the food bank to help with primarily sorting and preparing the orders that our agencies make. We have an online ordering system. We need volunteers for that. But I will also say that we have just solidified a partnership with an organization called Boston Cares, which is an organization that matches usually corporate groups with volunteer opportunities. And they now have a GBFB portal, so that if you are interested in volunteering in your community, for example, you can do that through this Boston Cares link, and they'll help you find a site. They'll ask you what you're interested in doing, and they're doing this match between volunteers and the work that's needed. So gbfb.org. On our homepage, we have our banner is a COVID-19 banner. Click on that and you'll see how you can help us with money and time. We urge you to do that, and also to use us as a portal for to provide support in your own communities.
Wonderful. And Asia, you and I were talking before earlier this week. There's you guys are accepting volunteer opportunities for people that wanted to show up in person and wanted to help for a day or more. What are some of the maybe skilled and non-skilled volunteer opportunities that you guys might be looking for? It might not just be packing bags and boxes to be distributed out somewhere else. What other types of labor are you guys looking for right now?
Yeah, so packing bags and boxes is a huge part of it. The food bank has taken, of course, many precautions. Arlene mentioned keeping our facilities pristine and clean. We're only taking very small groups of volunteers at a time, and just being very strategic to make sure that we are following CDC guidelines with keeping our volunteers safe. I think the best thing that people can do from home, and Arlene mentioned this, is to just raise awareness about the need that we have. And on our website, there's also a peer-to-peer fundraising option. So we see this a lot when people run races or do that type of fundraising. You can make a team and have send it out to your network and have your network donate directly to the cause. I mean, that if people are looking for things to do from home, that is the most helpful thing that folks can do. Obviously, if you are healthy and you feel comfortable enough to volunteer and come into the building, we of course need in-person help as well. But that, I know there are people who feel different types of way about that. So, I mean, I think from home, the best thing you can do is just spread awareness about the need that we have, and encourage people to donate at this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll also add to that if there's anybody out there with a Class A driver's license,
CDL, yeah,
or someone who has worked in a food warehouse, yeah. We could use you as well. And that would be a totally different kind of volunteer experience.
Yeah, so thank you very much about that. And that's, I kind of wanted to get there. I know things change. So, Asia, you and I earlier in the week were talking about,
Yeah.
truck drivers that might not be driving for their company right now.
Mhm.
But, this food, it's great if we can have the volunteers or get people to donate money so we can buy the food to get there into the food bank, get live bodies there to pack the food into the boxes. Then we load it onto a truck and it has to get to the
Right.
local food pantry somehow. So, Class A, CDL type drivers, I think, is something that you guys could really, use some help with getting the food there. And then warehouse workers too. I mean, if you're a non-essential business and you have some, warehouse experience, I mean, I have to imagine that your warehouse is absolutely, um, I guess, organized to a T, right? As far as the types of food goes, where it's going, the expiration dates, all of those things are
Yeah.
accounted for, right?
It's a very sophisticated operation. It's all driven by technology. We have an AGI system that allows for virtual communication and picking. In fact, we just this week, as part of our membership in Feeding America, we are required to be certified by a third party for issues related to food safety and cleanliness. So we work with the American Institute of Baking, and just this week on Thursday, we conducted their first ever um, virtual audit and received a score of 935 out of 1,000, which is higher than we've ever scored. And that's certified not only the cleanliness, but the organization, the processes and procedures that are in place to handle any kind of emergency that you can imagine. It's a remarkable operation that anyone who's ever worked in the industry would know that it's first rate.
Excellent. We have a lot of people on the call right now, which is awesome. Hopefully, the people that are on the call are getting a lot of information, from Asia and from Arlene. We're going to open this up to questions in just a little while. So if you guys have questions, at the bottom of the screen there's a chat box. So feel free to type in your questions, and we'll get to those questions in just a minute. Can you talk a little bit? I know when the Boston schools were closed, or when local schools, especially in the city, are closed, there's an increased demand on the food bank because a lot of the children that go to, Boston Public Schools, for example, get at least maybe 2 of their meals that they might get in a particular day, which could be the only 2 meals they get in a day,
Mhm.
from school, and then school's closed. So what are those kids going to do? So what do you guys have, or are you guys, I guess, helping with that? And does anything change? Do you guys just stock up the local food pantries more, or have you guys, I guess, been a part of that at all?
Yeah, we work with the schools in a couple of ways during normal times. We operate many school-based pantries where we make food available to families, and we also have supported legislation called Breakfast After the Bell, which enables a federal program to get food into the classroom after the school day has begun, to remove the stigma from having to arrive early to get a free breakfast and sit isolated in the cafeteria. So the Breakfast After the Bell program makes it possible for anybody in the classroom to eat the food. That was something we worked hard on and had a pass this past year. During this crisis now, the other thing we do is we participate in summer feeding programs. So during the crisis with the schools shut down, the schools have flipped to a summer feeding program mode. So we are continuing to provide food to schools to distribute that way, the way that they typically do. But they've opened up their restrictions so that any child 0 to age 18 can go to any school and get two meals every day. If you're a family of 4, you have 4 kids, you can go there and each kid can get 2 meals a day. So the summer feeding program model is what they're currently working on, and that's been our and we're participating in that.
Wonderful. So we had, if you guys have any questions, feel free to send the questions out. We had a question already about, you know, if people are conflicted about not staying home and going to volunteer, what can they do from home? So I think we answered that by getting on the internet and submitting a monetary donation that way. Are you guys, is the Greater Boston Food Bank, or are the cash donations to the Greater Boston Food Bank, is that tax deductible or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Except
all right.
for if it's when you support one of our events, if there is a tangible benefit that accrues, the value of that tangible benefit, like food and beverage,
Sure.
is deducted from what is tax deductible. But a cash donation, straight up cash, is tax deductible.
Okay. And, you know, a question that I had here too, I know, and maybe Asia, things have changed a bit, but we talked about the cost of food going up a lot. You mentioned, Arlene, you mentioned eggs earlier, and I think that was a, you know, 400% increase in just the cost of a dozen eggs. And that's to you guys, that's the, you know, wholesale number, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what types of disruptions, if any, have you guys seen in your ability, aside from the cost, to get food, to get supplies to the food bank? Has there been any disruption in that chain at all?
We've experienced some delays because of the situation that I described with the food retailers, so that we are, a lot of our inventory is back ordered. We're about 2 weeks behind on food deliveries, but don't anticipate any major disruptions in the supply chain. The only changes are the delay, obviously, and then the cost of freight and transportation.
Right, right. And if you did have somebody who's a truck driver, for example, Class A CDL license, what type of vetting would they have to go through? They volunteer with you guys, and do they show their license? And
You know, I'm not exactly sure. Our hiring process for truck drivers is very rigorous, includes a background check and a drug test and all of that. I don't know that we'd be relaxing those requirements for people who are going to be driving our trucks. Probably
Right.
not. So it would involve some detail.
Wonderful. Well, if there's no more questions, if we don't have any more questions from the people on the call here, is there anything, Asia and Arlene, that you guys would, you know, just like to wrap up with? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys think we should?
I think I've covered everything. I just am grateful to have the opportunity to be able to talk about the food bank and get the message out there. I think, you know, if there's anything that we've seen during this crisis is how many individuals and corporations that have really stepped up to support us. And we're just really grateful for that, and to be able to look back and say, like, wow, we can't do it without all that support. So I just wanted to put an emphasis on that.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. This has been a great opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And we have a couple of, we do have a couple of comments and questions here. So Sam says, thank you, Asia and Arlene. Such great information. You two are amazing. So just so you know, there's a lot of people out there right now, and you know, that think you guys are amazing. So that's a really good thing. And,
I'm going to tell my kids that when I get home.
That's right.
That there are people in the world who think I'm amazing.
Amazing, not just pretty good or cool or whatever, but
right.
Amazing. That goes a long way. And from Missy, we have members of local Rotary clubs are uniquely positioned to help. Do you find there's a specific place that we can help now? So we talked about money, monetary donations. We talked about bodies, local Rotary groups. Is there anything that you guys have done with them in the past, or haven't even explored that?
I don't know that we have in a formal way, but I would say for the local organizations, start local, because we hear that our pantry partners they're in a world of hurt around volunteers. So if there are local organizations, I would say hook up with your local, whoever, YMCA or the community health center, or whatever other distribution channels are out there. That would be a great thing.
Wonderful.
The other thing I just want to add is, if there is anybody out there who is in need of food or knows someone who is looking for a place to get food from, there's a place on our website, gbfb.org, where we list out all of our member agencies, their their hours of operation if we know them. We've made trying to make notes on the ones that we know are temporarily closed. So if there's anybody out there looking for that resource, it can also be found on gbfb.org.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Bob, I don't know if you communicate with this group of people electronically, but we have a one pager that lists all the various ways that one can get food and food resources in addition to the our website. We could share that with you.
Yeah, if you could share that, I can definitely share it with the people that are on the call, and I'll share it as a post when this call gets, uploaded to social media too.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. So if there's nothing else, guys, thank you very much. I do want to say that our team here, after this call, we're going to be contributing $500 to
Oh,
the
thank
Boston
you.
Food Bank. We're
That's
gonna be,
amazing.
going
Thank you,
online
Bob.
and thank you very much for the opportunity to help. And I'll tell everybody on the call, everybody that's watching here, if I can go online and figure out how to make that contribution, anybody can. All right. So we're going to get that done. That's going to be our big mission for today.
Excellent.
Asia and Arlene, thank you guys so much
You're
for
welcome.
joining us here. If there's
Thank you.
help, please don't hesitate to reach out. But you guys really are doing God's work. I mean, your services are needed all the time, but especially now. So thank you both very much for what it is you guys do. It's just very, very important work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.